Hey folks, Country Prepper here. Well, since I started doing a lot of videos here in the garage, just discussion videos, I've had a lot of people asking me about my little wood stove over here. And that is the TMS military style camp stove, and I'll leave a link to it on Amazon or eBay in the description box below. It's about 70 bucks, and actually I think I found it a little cheaper than that on Amazon recently, but anyhow, it's somewhere around 70 bucks if I remember right. But I've been using this for over a year now, and it's just perfect for my little garage here, my work area, my shop where I make my kydex sheaths. And you can't put really big pieces of wood in it, but, you know, something about the size of your forearm is about as big as you want to go. Otherwise, it just doesn't have enough volume to burn large logs in there. But it does a fine job. It, even with the way I have it set up, and I'll show you here in a minute, it still draws really well. The one downside to it is if you use any type of wood that leaves off a lot of creosote, it's going to plug up the chimney pretty fast. I've cleaned the chimney out twice already this year. Once in the fall when I first fired it up, and then just here about a week ago I had to do it again. So not too terrible for, it's just a little over like 2.5-inch pipe, something like that for the exhaust, or maybe it was just 2. Anyhow, somewhere in there. I'll leave all the specs. Actually, there's going to be my original video. I'll leave a link to it up here in the corner, and you can get all the specs and all that kind of stuff from that, or just go check it out on Amazon. All the specs are there too. But anyhow, it does work really well for a small space. A large garage, it would not keep it very warm. I have half of my garage sectioned off with a couple of tarps just to kind of keep the heat in a smaller enclosure. So, but it would work really great for a canvas tent that has the chimney hole in it, whatever you want to call it, and or a shed, or like a half or really small garage. Like I said, I got mine sectioned in half, so it's probably a 20 by 20 space, something like that. So not too bad. So some people will think this looks like kind of a cob job, but it works well. There was already a 6-inch chimney pipe going through the roof, so I just stuck this pipe up through it, put a reducer on it, and kind of shrunk it down for this pipe, and then put the cap on top. I can't take you outside to show you what it looks like. It's snowing and blowing like a son of a bitch outside right now, but anyhow, I just have, I have a pretty good length of pipe in there going at a 45, so even with that, it really draws great, but it also slows down, your gases and all that stuff, and that's kind of why the chimney has to be cleaned out more often than usual. If you had a straight shot, I think you'd be okay for a full season. But anyhow, I tape all my seams really well with aluminum tape. And the reason for that is if you should happen to have some kind of a chimney fire, you don't want it blowing out at the seams. And so this is just single-walled pipe. That's all I could get to work with this. If you were to put it in any type of a shed, or if you put it in a garage, something like that, it is not easy to find pipe for it. It's an oddball size. So that's why I have it the way I do. It was everything I could do to make this work. So you see, I got a little fan going back there to blow the heat towards me, and the bench is on the other side of the garage. And then I have, see that wire running over there? I have a deep cell battery up there right now. The charger's on it because it's been cloudy for too many days in a row, and I usually have a solar panel that keeps the battery charged up, but right now it's not doing its job. So anyhow, that's how I've got the chimney set up. I had a couple people ask me about this pot that's sitting on top of the stove. This grate up here works really well. You could set a shallow pan of water on there and it will boil. I have gotten this big pot to boil with a lid on it, but with the lid off, I'll have a few bubbles, but that's about it. Never gets to a rolling boil. But the whole point of that is to provide a little more humidity in the room. Wood heat is very dry heat. Okay, so I moved the pot off to the side so I could show you this. These racks do flip out, and so that is so that if you're using this like as a a tent stove, then you could flip those out and use it to hang your socks or your gloves or whatever to dry stuff out. And also these tubes on the sides, I don't know if there's any truth behind this, but I've been told that since this is modeled after a military stove, that is for putting like a potato or something like that in to cook, so that yeah, I don't know if there's any truth to that or not, but anyhow, that's what I was told. There's really no good use for them other than they hold those racks out nice and flat. So the legs are not really sturdy, but I will say this. In the fall when I cleaned out the chimney, I fell and knocked the stove over, and the legs, they got a little bent, but they went right back. And, I mean, they hold up the weight. I can fill that pot full of water on top of the stove, and they don't collapse at all. So, they are strong enough, but if you're planning on installing something like this permanently into a shed or whatever, I would go with something a little stronger. Like I was saying earlier, you can't get anything really big in here. I mean, you can get big stuff in here, but it just won't burn. There's just not enough volume. But as far as the door opening goes, about 6 inches, a little less, about 5.5 actually, that you can actually get in here. Now, one thing I will say, oh, by the way, it does come with these little rods here. One for kind of moving your stuff around, and then this one for cleaning stuff out. Anyhow, the rack that came with it was absolute crap. It burned up. It got hot and was bowing and breaking, and just it was too cheap, too thin a material. So this is actually a charbroil grill rack. And you can pick those up at Home Depot or Menards or, any type of, home improvement type stores will have grates like this. And you'll just have to, I can't pull it out of there right now since everything's hot in there still. But you just have to measure the rack that comes with it and find something that fits pretty close. This one actually extends a little bit. And if you can see where I'm getting in between there, you can actually pull this rack out, but it was the perfect size with this bar on there, so I just left it the way it was. I could have pulled that apart, but there was no need to. But anyway, that rack is holding up pretty well for about a year's worth of use now. I replaced it about a month after getting this installed here in the garage, so it was really weak. It just won't hold up. I did do a little bit of a modification to the door. This thing does not draw a lot of air like I was talking about. It just doesn't have the volume. So I bent the bottom of this door out so that it can pull air in down here without letting any smoke out up above. So instead of drilling more holes or anything like that, I just bent this out. Now it does have one of these shutters on the back, and then it also has a tray underneath for cleaning out ashes. But I've never used it. All I do is just pull the rack out, use this scraper here, and just pull the ashes out front, and that's why I have my ash bucket down here. One last little thing about the door, if you happen to get one of these, this here stays really hot. So I use a pair of pliers to open and close it, and also you have to make sure that you pull it up just as often as you flip it over, because if you just keep going clockwise with it, it will tighten this nut up inside of here, and then you won't be able to move it. So that's why it looks kind of loose, but most of the time it draws well enough that I don't even have to close the door. I don't have to latch it. I just close it like that, and that way it lets a little more heat out in the room, and but also draws more than enough air. One thing I'm actually surprised by is it just has a little tack weld right here, and one here and here, and on the hinge, and it's actually holding up really well. It has not broken. I haven't had to do any welding on this. Everything, all the welds have held up well, and everything else. So there is my 1-year update review of my TMS camp stove. I'll tell you what, for no more than it costs, it has provided me a lot of heat. After the extra pipe and the rack and the cap chimney, all that kind of stuff, all the other things that I had to buy to go along with it, $100 has saved me hundreds of dollars in heating this shop out here. So I think it is well worth it if you have a small area that you need to heat. It would also be a really great alternative heat source for preppers, especially like in the wintertime if you live in the colder regions of the country or Canada or whatever. You know, if you had to, you know, like section off a room in your house with plastic or tarps or whatever, or blankets, whatever you have, and then have like a you know, something that you could put in the window, a piece of steel or whatever. Don't use wood. It gets a little too hot for that. But if you had a place where you could quickly set this up temporarily to keep one room heated, I think that would be a great option, a good inexpensive option, because I think the cheapest wood stove I've found from like Tractor Supply or something like that is like $300. Then you have all the pipe on top of that, and 6-inch pipe is expensive. So this would be a good option for an emergency heat source. I do think so. So anyway, that's it for today, guys. Make sure you check out all the links in the description box below. Hit that thumbs up button, and thank you for watching. See you next time.